So welcome everybody. We're just 1 minute late with this little play here in the beginning. And I've got a real exciting guest over here, someone I've met over LinkedIn and someone whose knowledge quickly just like jumped out of the noise, like at me through LinkedIn, because he's, I saw several interviews with him and read some of his content. And I was like, whoa, I gotta get to know this dude. And then we're both in the trenches community. So maybe that's the first place where we connected. And then we just took it from there. And I was like, Josh, we gotta do a show. We gotta start talking about something. So welcome to the Electric B2B show. It's great to have you. And please just say a few words about yourself and your background and your hobbies and how long you've been growing your beard.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. And honestly, I stood out because that was by design. I actually saw all of the posts and all the content that you were putting out. Immediately was impressed. I was like, hey, I got to get this guy's attention. So I immediately reached out, was pinging you a bunch. But from a bit about me, I come from a native advertising background at my core. So I have a lot of experience in the front of digital distribution.
Okay, define native advertising for us.
Right. So native advertising, it's still ongoing, but that was new about 6 years ago. That's advertising that's supposed to fit the form and function of the publishing site that it sits on. So this was most commonly seen, and still today is most commonly seen on the likes of social media tools. So you look on Facebook and you can see like one of those sponsored posts that looks like someone actually wrote it.
Yeah.
That fits into the bucket of native advertising.
Yeah. So you started out with native advertising.
Yeah. And that transition, that grew a lot more. I got my master's degree in international business management with a specialization in marketing. And, then I moved over to Bitmovin, which is a B2B video technology provider. And as an American living in Europe, their first thought was, let's get this guy on content. So that immediately expanded my knowledge out to building out content strategies. But content is a two-way street. You create content, but then who's going to read it unless you're distributing it? Yeah. So I was able to put two and two together. And there's a lot more that I could go into about the other things that I know within marketing, but from the framework of this particular discussion, my specific knowledge set goes into content and the distribution sets.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so when we started talking about, okay, what should we talk about? You were thinking for like a second or two, and then you're like, content distribution, of course.
Yeah.
So how is it? Obviously, like it's pivotal to have a good content strategy, but I'm not sure if this is your impression, but it's my impression that there's a lot of talk about content on the one hand. There's a lot of talk about advertising and traffic in general, but not a lot of talk about how distribution fits into a content strategy. Okay. So whenever I read something about content strategy, like distribution seems to be a given in people's thinking. So they're like, okay. And then of course you have to distribute the content, but not a lot of people go into it. And I feel like I could learn a lot more about content distribution. So like, what's your approach and what's your framework?
So there are a few creators out there who are really pushing it. There's an organization called Foundation Inc. And their CEO, Ross Simmons, he's all about distribution. And his framework really resonates with me. And his approach is very much around create once and distribute forever. And it's all about leveraging all of as many channels that you have as your disposal. Now, from my perspective, the missing point there is doing a little bit of research. So he goes through the motions. Hey, you have all of these different social media channels, and he talks about the different kind of content that fits on each social media channel. But what he doesn't talk about, for example, are email marketing metrics, paid media channels that I think are not very well known unless you're within a very, very specific industry.
Okay.
And he doesn't talk about some of the more legacy formats, which could be in person and conversational. Because right now, otherwise, all folks are talking about PPC, paid organic, or sorry, paid social and organic social, occasionally the email marketing and, Google ads, which is PPC. I realize.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's so many more. There's so much more you can get into.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some of these legacy channels? I'm interested.
Legacy channels, that's print.
That's print.
That's print, and then showing up in person and doing presentations. You can also think about that from the perspective of PDF distribution.
Okay, so let's put this into the context of, I don't know, high value sales in B2B in technology. Yeah. So what would that look like?
Oh, goodness. Right. So what my former organization, BitMovin, did is they are going to multiple trade shows throughout the year. And one of the key things that they're known for at this particular trade show is this thing called a video developer report. So they do a massive survey around the world, gathering as many insights from video developers. And first and foremost, that becomes a digital asset. That's how you gain the most eyes around it. But they also put a huge effort into putting fantastic design work into it behind the graphs and the information. Mm-hmm. And what looks better than having one of these printed, minted, and handed to you physically? It's a different level of brand experience. It's not necessarily measured, but it's something that's remembered. And in the way that it can be measured, that we found often, is this is where you get back to the digital side. People take a picture about it, they tweet about it. It's like, oh, these are fantastic insights. The other side, from the B2B perspective that you're talking about, that I think there's a few people who are picking it up. Again, now, especially through the pandemic, it's direct mail. I haven't personally used it. I don't know if you can convince me as a marketer to be like, yeah, let's go with direct mail once again. But there's a time and place for it too. If you have a high ACV prospect, you have someone that you really want to gain the attention of, you have their information granted to you, within GDPR rights, like you didn't just scope them out, like they actually gave you their address and their information, and you send them like a really sweet swag pack or really nice package that reminds them, hey, I'm thinking of you. Right? That's a really interesting method of distribution. You could, within these swag packs, you could also include important materials about your solution, about your organization.
So and content, basically.
Yeah, you bring it back to content.
Just gifts or direct, like sales letters, which is what we use direct mail for. But you can also send like printed out, physical, actual, manifested content.
Yeah, I know a few people who if you do the design well, I know a few people who sometimes, cut up. Okay, maybe they don't cut out the front cover. You create like a little wall of reports.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
There are people like that. And also, speaking of legacy channels, like I would almost consider email newsletters to be that, because they're about as old as the World Wide Web. Like that's a 90s thing.
But they're not legacy.
Comeback, they're making.
I wouldn't call them legacy because everyone still uses email for everything. Yeah. It's still, there's, technically plain. Okay, maybe what I would call legacy is plain text, but even that has so much value to it.
Yes.
The problem is if you're not willing to provide a phone number, which most people are not, you don't want to be bothered. You're going to provide your email address. Like, okay, fine. I don't mind. If I'm really bothered by what they're sending me, I could put them in spam. I can just delete. I could ignore. So people don't mind sharing their email address. And thus you have a new channel for email communications. And that's a hugely effective distribution channel. You can put so much in there, and we can kind of go in depth there, but I want to pass it back to you.
No, like I love email. So I'm an email marketing junkie. I've been doing email since 2006, and it's the primary channel which I've built almost everything on that I've ever built business-wise in my life. The way I see email newsletters is that in the beginning, everybody wanted to have an email newsletter, and still on like a billion websites, but literally a billion websites at least, you'll see the sign up for our email newsletter. And like up to the early 2000s, people actually were like, oh, yes, I get to have a free newsletter. I'm giving my email to this one. And they're like, oh, my gosh, I got an email. It's a newsletter. So, that was a thing. And then pretty soon, it got kind of frustrating and boring because everybody started sending email newsletters, which usually weren't full of content. They were promotional stuff and they were like news. And so people got fed up pretty fast. And then there was a whole spam thing. So now email newsletters started like vanishing or diminishing, and they were replaced. And, marketers were advised to actually provide, like frame it differently and not call it a newsletter and not even make it a newsletter, but make it something else, like some educational piece or whatever else. And for some reason, like right after most people declared email marketing dead, for some reason, email newsletters made a comeback. And I saw like reputable businesses putting out email newsletters, and I signed up for a few. You have the Morning Brew, and you have a bunch.
I would argue that it was Morning Brew that was one of the main drivers of bringing it back.
Really? Okay.
They brought in that level of value that was missing from the newsletters that became a little overwhelming. Yeah. So Morning Brew wasn't pushing their product. They're pushing information. And you're scrolling through your email every morning anyway. You're open to receiving this information. It's like reading a newspaper. It's a newspaper. That's a newsletter, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same concept. So from the perspective of B2B, when you want to apply a newsletter, don't push your product first. Ensure that you're sharing a lot of information. And again, that's where your other content comes in. You can repurpose your content. You could make it in email format, like short snippets, and then drive through to your blog sites or whatever have you, if you have a video. Exactly. Yeah, there's that framework. And I think a big part of it is you're getting people to opt in once again. And this whole...
It's a micro commitment.
Yeah. And one of the things that Morning Brew was pushing so well was this referral system. You're having people say, hey, this is my friend who also really enjoys this type of content. They should sign up too. And you reward both people for referring and activating. So I think that's something that you can kind of copy, but you want to make sure that you have the right framework and the right set of content in place there. You don't want to overwhelm. Like that's why newsletters got not killed off, but that's why they diminished over time, because they became overwhelming.
Let's pause here with email newsletters, because if you take like nothing else away from this conversation, but the fact that you have to be doing email newsletters, then it was worth it. Like, yeah. I'm real curious, you guys who are on the call right now, Esther and Manas and Patricia and everybody else. Are you guys actively doing email newsletters? Please just put a plus in the chat if you are, and a minus if you're not. I'd be really interested, because I'm betting like not a lot of people. Oh yes, Esther's doing newsletters. Okay, we got Patricia who says she didn't or she's not. Dana's doing newsletters, of course, because she works at Clear, and Scott's about to start. That's a good thing. Okay, because here's the thing. As I said, I've been doing newsletters since 2006, and you could argue that, that's been like how many years? 16 years. Like in that time, the sheer amount of emails that people got must have shot up exponentially. And so you would think that the engagement or the open rates on these newsletters have been dropping like that. And a lot of smart people have been telling you that email is dead and email marketing is considered spam by everybody, and nobody reads email, and they go to spam folders and whatnot. But I can tell you from firsthand experience that even today in 2022, when targeting marketers, who gets a lot of email if not marketers. So we're targeting marketers and salespeople with our electric B2B newsletter once a week, and we get around 30% open rate. So upwards of 30%, for weaker sends. And when we send at bad times, it's like 22 to 25%. But when we have a better headline and we send at the right time, it's like above 30%. And it's about the same as it was in 2006. What's really dropped though is the click-through rates. So we're not even wanting people to click through anymore. So now the strategy with newsletters, it used to be get people onto your website, get people onto your sales page, your website, and whatever. So newsletters used to be like this collection of like teaser content, and then you'd want people to click through. Now what you want is to do what Morning Brew does, and the Motley Fool and all these other newsletters, is to just put everything into that newsletter. And it doesn't matter if it's 9 miles long and you have to scroll for hours to get to the bottom. That's okay. People are going to scroll. So
I'd like to dig in on one of those points. You address that there's a certain time of day that y'all are finding that has the best open rate and best engagement metrics. What's the best time of day?
Yeah, there's a lot of anecdotes around that. So our thinking is that we want to send newsletters on Fridays because the assumption or the hypothesis is that people have more time to read stuff and people dedicate more time to education on a Friday than on a Monday morning, for example. And so these educational, entertaining emails, which the Electric B2B emails are, we try to send those on Fridays, preferably before 2 p.m. Central European time, because that's where most of our audience is. And, after 2 p.m., people will sign off. But oftentimes, because I have such big problems with consistency and getting my shit together, I don't send the email in time. So I end up, I've tried sending, Friday night, Sunday afternoon. I didn't send it on Saturday, but those tended to be bad times.
Did you see the open rates increasing on Monday? So you get like a low rate when you first send, and then people actually open it up later on then when they're getting back online?
Yeah, but it didn't happen. So the overall open rate didn't increase. So yeah, that could have happened. But it seems like they didn't go and open emails from Friday afternoon on a Monday morning. So that just didn't happen. So it's best to send emails because, they become old very fast because people get so many emails. And yeah, so that's, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, Esther said it's working well for us. That's awesome. If you'd like, you can totally come on, Esther, and talk about that if you feel like it. I'd love to learn.
For those who are curious, the email marketing metrics that I'm talking about is still the one-to-one methodology, and it still can come from marketing emails as well, but you have to send it from a specific sender type. So I've seen a lot of really good distribution strategies here where you can also take content snippets from your various content types, be it blogs, webinars, what have you, cut that up into snippets, and you frame that within that one-to-one email and say, hey, did you hear about this? Or the other side of it is, oh, I got some interesting learnings. And that's also a methodology to invite people to the particular sessions to read more. And to Hen's point about in the newsletters, we also saw spectacular open rates from that perspective. And that's something that I'd really like to encourage because to me, that was one of the distribution channels that's not necessarily under leveraged because everyone's still doing one-to-one. But I think the misconception within marketing is that all of your emails need to be formatted and need to be in an HTML design to bring across that brand, to bring across your content. There is a level of distribution which you could apply at that email marketing level. That's, not just HTML design, you have a high reply rate as well. And I think if you're doing it right, if you don't make it sound robotic, if you make it seem truly personalized, that's when you get very good distribution and very good engagement. The way that I like to do it is I read it as if I'm the recipient. It's like, oh, does this actually engage me? Probably not. If not, then I go back and check it again. Yeah, that's from email marketing. So I'll drop in a couple of options. Oh, wait, first, I see a question from Esther. Trend is to create zero-click content. So how do you get your audience to your website? How do you convert? I think the trend around zero-click content is framed around that first touch point. So you have clicks coming in at the second, third, I wouldn't go past third, but second or third, either email or touch point. But the first touch point should be, hey, let's get aligned. Let's get on the same level. Let's understand that we're both people and create a conversation. And then eventually you can kind of convert them to either your website or to a piece of content. And I think it's a very conversational aspect. I think the way to really push a conversion in that perspective is not to push at all. Try to get that click to be a very organic, like, oh, hey, I read this piece of content that was highly informative. I learned XYZ from it. I think you would learn about it too. But, get there in a conversation. Don't just slot it in. I think there's ways you can drive the conversation a little bit more naturally. That's my thoughts. Dan, did you see that? Did you see that comment? I was just addressing the comment from Esther, which is creating zero-click content and how to convert people to come into your website.
Yeah. I love that phrase. I just read it somewhere. Zero-click content. It's great.
Yeah. So that was my perspective. I went ahead and talked a bit about the other email marketing framework, which is the one-to-one format, where it's not an HTML design, it's plain text, and how that I think is highly valuable because it's much more personalized, especially if you don't make it fill it with marketing terminology, just as if you're sending one of your colleagues an email, but within the framework of, hey, I'm trying to share information. But the other distribution strategies I wanted to get into were the perhaps less known ones, which were what our friends at the Trenches community like to call dark social. And also I wanted to talk about the other paid media channels, which are really reflective of knowing your specific industry.
Yeah, both are super interesting. Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, this is the toss-up. I was going to pass it to the chat. Okay. So chat, which one do you want to hear about first? Dark social, drop an A, or different paid media channels, drop a B? I know that sounds strange. I got that TikTok sound from the Audrey Hurd, the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Stepped on a bee. All right.
Por favor, everybody's into dark social. It's the thing now.
Do you wanna go over it? You might know it a little bit more. I have conceptually a good understanding of dark social. I know you've discussed it here and there.
Yeah. Okay. Dark social is a term that was coined by Chris Walker. And the way he defines dark social is those channels on the internets where people go to consume professional information, which are not trackable by attribution and analytics software. Okay, so the significance of that is that if a link gets dropped into a place like that, or if somebody talks about you there, and then because somebody else reads it and heads over to your website or your LinkedIn profile or whatever, you're never going to know because there's no software that would track it. And for this reason, data-driven marketers or marketers who have been rightly trained to be data-centric and data-minded are like, oh, I don't care about that. I don't want to have to deal with that because you can't measure it. So we're never going to know if it works or not. And it's dark because you can't track it. And there's this concept, which Chris strongly advocates, that it's where shit happens. So dark social, it's LinkedIn, it's closed communities, closed Slack channels like the Trenches, which runs on Slack or Peak Community or whatever. So whenever somebody clicks through from there or just reads about you, you're never going to be able to track it. So that's why it's dark. And it is an important area where things are taking place right now. So that's the definition. There you go.
Yeah. So I think the next logical step is how do you distribute content on dark social? And my first thought there is make it snackable, right? So make it snackable, make it shareable. That's the type of thing where you put quotes that people love to take. So I haven't been doing this on purpose, but I guess I've been dropping some snackable quotes on LinkedIn here and there. Like, for example, uh, when you're doing testing, test with clear intent. So these are quotables, things that can be put on an image, things that can be shared, things that can be put into a video or a GIF. I think that those are likely the best things for the likes of dark social.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you had any experience at Clear with dark social?
No, okay. Like, so LinkedIn qualifies as dark social, so we're pretty active on LinkedIn. But I've also been, of course, okay. The way most people go about this is either spamming. Okay, the people who do it wrong go in there and spam, and you can certainly do that. Not a lot of people are going to like you, and it's not very effective. Okay, so like in communities such as Peak and Trenches and Pavilion and whatnot, you usually have some kind of a pod where you can share the content that you've posted on your website or on LinkedIn or whatever, and people can go and sort of like engage with it and like it. And I know that whenever we use that feature in Trenches, but we get about 2 or 3 clicks to our content every time we post it there. So it's like nothing, I might even stop doing it. But the way you do it right is you don't start with content. So you start content distribution not by distributing content, but by helping people, because you take part in conversations. And what you do is, as you're helping somebody, as you're making a point, you can point to your articles in a totally native way. Okay, so like Josh asked something, and like you did that in the Trenches just the other day. You asked about something, Vlad came in, he answered, and he pointed you to one of their articles.
Yeah. All right. That was a question about how do you build the frame? How do you define your ICP? With my expectation was to start discourse, and he ended up having the perfect article
Yeah.
to answer that question.
So okay.
Faster communication. Yeah.
So sorry, content distribution, like if you're doing it this way, it's different from the regular cadence of, okay, we just wrote a post, so let's put it in a newsletter, let's put some paid ads on it, let's put it here and here and here and here. In dark social, you can't just go and post it. What you do is you take part as a member of the community, and then when the time comes to lead somebody to that article, then you lead them to the article or content asset or content piece. So it starts with being active and dropping in your links as you go along on an as needed basis, like as it's appropriate, because then it's not spammy, then it's not pushy, then it's like organically embedded into the way people are existing in these spaces. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. My takeaway now from between, the one-to-one email, the new framework of newsletters, and this dark social framework is that distribution methodologies need to be oriented first and foremost around, first, hey, who's your target audience? Make sure that you know them and you know them well to understand the type of content you want to be distributing to them and why. And second, and perhaps debatably more important, make it human. Make it natural and don't push it on people. People come to your content if it's interesting and if you've brought it up in a very organic and native format. Because, who wants to be pushed into a certain content? I think that's the most engaging type, when you find some interest and you've already followed this person naturally in your own right and created your own set of conversations.
Yeah. Do you guys have any questions about dark social? Or do you have other things to say, or shall we move on?
On dark social in general? Kind of. Do things like forums, like the likes of Reddit, and Quora count as dark social? Because, for
I don't
example,
think,
I know Quora specifically, I don't think it's very bad practice to drop links in
uh-huh.
Quora posts. So to me, that kind of fits under the framework of dark social because the whole idea there is just sharing information.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it counts as dark social. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if you can track traffic coming from there, then it's not dark.
But you can't because you're not dropping links, right?
Yeah. But so if you can't, then it will be a dark, an untrackable place. And yeah, you just pointed out like the essence of these platforms that it is usually bad practice to be dropping links. And it's
Mm.
what you guys just refer to as zero click content. Like if they're there, like give them the content where they are.
And in the type that they want it. So
Yeah.
that goes back to that very first topic that we discussed, which was break up the content in many different formats and snippets. And a big part of distributing your content correctly is making sure that you have the different formats to do so. I mean, channels like LinkedIn, it's wild. There's so many different formats you can play with, all that have potential successful outputs. Because LinkedIn, I think you know this very well, Dan, is rewards engagement. So anything that counts as an engagement technically will be rewarded. So that means a click, that means a view. Uh, yeah, so even presentations. I think one of our acquaintances, Vlad from the trenches, we brought that up quite often now. He loves to post slide decks,
Yeah.
and that alone counts as an engagement when you click the next slide. So I think that's why he's just been really milking it. So
Yeah.
that's one of my next experiments for my personal social account. I'm gonna be experimenting with slide decks on there.
Good. Do that. And this is just out today that the next feature LinkedIn is rolling out is video carousels. So
Ooh,
you can put videos in those carousels basically. So you can, like flip and then you can start, okay, just slide the screen if you want to know tip number one. And then you slide the screen and then you're in a video doing tip number one. And then, okay, swipe
I'm
for tip
cu-
number two.
I'm curious how that'll play out because
Yeah.
my suspicion was that most people, with the exception of when you're in your free time and looking at TikTok or Instagram, for example, my suspicion is that most people are trying to view LinkedIn videos on mute. So LinkedIn very often, presumably, this is just personal perception,
Yeah.
would have rewarded things that have subtitles.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't necessarily, at least, okay, I'm ready to be proven wrong. I'm excited by this experiment from LinkedIn. But my perception is that the carousels may not work well because, yes, that's an extra engagement, but presumably from a carousel for video, you'd want to focus in on that audio aspect.
Mhm.
Keen to see how it works. Do you know when that'll be rolling out?
No, they said they're going to start rolling it out now, and they're going to give it to all creators in the fall.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, that's it. That's the news. There you go.
Yeah, cool. Well,
Okay.
the other topic I wanted to talk about was the other paid media channels, which perhaps these folks are here for to understand where they can find them and what they are.
Yeah.
Should I
Yeah.
just go ahead and kick it off?
Yeah. Yeah. Do it. Do it.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So these channels that I'm talking about, they often end up being highly focused based on a very specific industry. So, first of all, this could apply to if you're looking at targeting those in your own industry, you'll likely have a good understanding. Like, look at the magazines or even the digital magazines that you're working with. These are additional paid channels that they're leveraging. So, these media production companies, these magazines, or what were formerly print magazines, they're taking on these digital formats. And a lot of them are starting to build lookalike product offerings to what to what we know as PPC, ABM, demand gen. They're building all of these things where you can purchase, like, oh, hey, we'll do lead gen for you. You need to give us content. That could be a webinar. that could be a PDF, that could be you work with them on a webinar, or they create a PDF for you that you sponsor, and then you gain the leads. So step one, knowing your own industry. And of course, that's the easy way. But the fun part begins when your organization is looking to segment their target audiences by industry. So the likes of, for example, let's say e-learning or gaming. These all have their own segments. They have their own publications. They have their own segments and distribution channels. There's a really fantastic site for e-learning, which just lists the thousands upon thousands of e-learning providers that are on their web. It's called elearninglearning.com. Wild, so creative for their name, but I'm not talking smack because it's brilliant. But they have a wonderful thing. It's also a media publication effectively outside of just the review page. They're also using that. They host webinars, they create webinars, they create PDFs, and they've created a lead generation strategy. And this becomes highly focused because you should know, looking at their site, you probably can very easily find out who their target audience is and who their buyers and suppliers are. And you can pretty easily segment from there. And this could apply to almost any industry from my perspective. It's just a little bit of extra research that you need to do. Yeah. I don't know the pricing on those. My suspicion is that technically pricing might be a bit higher, but I think the quality of particular leads, I know, Dan, you and I were just discussing cookieless world and first party data versus zero party data. So I'm keen to get your feedback there. What are your thoughts on buying leads?
Well, you're not buy. Okay, like yeah, you can buy leads, but I think what you were getting at is not that, but it's distributing your content through the places, through the associations or publications, because they have their own lists, and usually big ones, and they have members who are usually engaged, and they have the authority. So if they put you in their newsletter, or they recommend you, or they bring you on a webinar, which is what you mentioned, and it's great. You're in a good place. Buying leads from them, I don't know. I'm not going to talk crap at that because it can work. Like, as uncool as it is in 2022 to buy leads and lists, and to cold call, it's not fashionable. It's not trendy, but it can freaking work. So try it and see, like, if it's not against your religion to cold call and buy leads, then try it, test it.
My methodology there, my perception on purchasing leads. So for example, going to WeWork and saying, hey, this is the target audience I'd like to build. Get me these emails, these job titles at companies this size. And maybe you have a company list. My perception there is that you should not be marketing to these people, not directly, because they didn't opt in. I'm living in Europe now. I'm a huge fan of GDPR compliance at this point. Like, some marketers hate it, but to me, it's just like that just means you're getting to people who have shown a vested interest in you. But I am not opposed to buying these leads, but this is where I think the likes of retargeting might play in well. And this is also where you can work with your SDR team or BDR teams to kind of make that first touch point with 0 clicks, to really engage and build that relationship and convince these people, hey, check out our site. I'm not going to send you a link, but check out our site to learn more and give us your information willingly. But just so you know, we exist. And I think that's kind of the framework you should take from that perspective if you are buying leads.
Yeah. So view these channels as an opportunity for demand generation, not necessarily direct lead generation.
Yeah.
Give them content, engage them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then,
I'm trying to think if there's any other channels that I missed that I love leveraging. But from my side, it was these kind of less discussed paid media fronts that are highly focused and highly
Yeah.
segmented
Yeah.
already.
So overlooked.
Yeah. I'm wondering what are the top I want to pass it to the audience too here again. What are the top ones maybe that you all know that we didn't address today that you think we're missing? Bueller?
You can throw it in the chat, or if you have questions regarding any of these.
Mm-hmm.
Because from my perspective, like, you don't need a gazillion channels to do this well, and you shouldn't try to leverage like 9 channels at a time for distribution. Like, do a couple of ones that work. Like, if you're planning to do newsletters, as somebody just said, I think Scott, yeah, like double down on that. Like, add newsletters to your mix, and then add something else, and then if that works, look for one of these publications or trade magazines or whatever, and then try to strike a partnership with them and see how that works. And once you test out all of these, I mean, you're going to be so well off that more channels is not going to be necessarily like the top thing that you're looking for. So you can always add more channels later, but the thing is, try the one or two that you think will work next.
Yeah, I think that's also a fallacy of like testing too much. You can very easily say, hey, let's do all of these channels, but then never testing them properly and getting the correct results that you need.
Yeah. Especially like on social, like testing a new social platform. Like, people underestimate that by miles. I mean, it's like you gotta jump in there. You gotta be in the comments. You gotta be interacting. You've got to be like that's massive amounts of time, and then like all the time, and then you start posting and distributing, and then nothing's going to happen for a while. I mean, like when I started posting regularly on LinkedIn, I got like tiny bit pieces of success and positive feedback, but I never got traction for months and months and months. So testing just one social platform is a shitload of time and resources.
Yeah, but it's the right way to do it for sure.
It is. Yeah. Like, now testing like some publication and like a sponsored newsletter, obviously, you can give it like 2 or 3 tries and then it's good.
Yeah. And they also help you with that. So that's a little bit of alleviated resources.
Yeah. Esther had a good question. What do you think about LinkedIn newsletter feature? How effective is it now? I can't tell you for sure, but I'm going to Josh.
I think it still has potential. I don't think it's worth investing time into now. If you have the resources from the perspective of time and people, test it out. I mean, obviously, I think a regular email newsletter is a lot more effective. It's a bigger bang for your buck when talking about how much time you have to put into it. But if you have the time to copy paste and to work on the formatting within the LinkedIn newsletter, you can get some. The issue is LinkedIn hasn't prioritized it as a highly engaging format yet. So going back to what LinkedIn prioritizes in its feed, it's engagement. You can see 100% what LinkedIn cares about. LinkedIn groups, those are hot garbage because you can join as many groups as you want. You can have highly engaged members and they still never show up in your feed. It will always prioritize either the creators or your personal connections first. In the same vein, LinkedIn newsletter is not prioritized in your feed. It does show up. I subscribed, I think, to 3 or 4 LinkedIn newsletters because I was just as interested to see how they push this out. Not well. You get the occasional notification. They send you a notification occasionally, but that's 1 out of 4 of the newsletters. What happened to the other 3? So I think it's a channel that has potential, but LinkedIn as an organization needs to put more into
everything
into everything around it, supporting it and getting it
product and
people's
analytics.
eyes. But it is a good channel. You could think about the same thing. LinkedIn also has a blogs feature. Blogs and newsletters have the same level of effectiveness.
Wow, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah. I mean, we had at BitMovin, what did we do? We posted our employee. We had a couple of employee stories. We posted those because they didn't fit on the official website blog. So we'd been posting those on the LinkedIn blog because LinkedIn is one of your is still a fantastic recruitment tool, especially from a business page. So we've been keeping those articles there, but they're so difficult to find. But it's a good tool, which is a shame. It's a good tool. LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. So they have Microsoft Word. They've built in the right features. They just haven't brought it to your feed, which is a shame. I think there's opportunity for LinkedIn. I think there's opportunity for creators with both newsletters and blogs. But until LinkedIn prioritizes that, it's not worth the time.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I was actually speculating that we would try to just copy and paste our email newsletters to LinkedIn and see what happens. But the thing with newsletters is that you want to prioritize email over everything else because you want to own your email list. And it's scary enough to be investing a lot of time into building your presence on any platform that you don't own, because there's like an actual risk of you getting shut out or your account being hijacked and everything else. So we are now in the process of repurposing all of our content that we put on LinkedIn so that it's available through our website in the form of like bite-sized pieces of content. And it's going to be like a daily newsletter that people can subscribe to so that it lives on, because on LinkedIn, after 5 days, it just gets buried.
Really? LinkedIn, I've seen that LinkedIn posts have a much longer life cycle, actually.
Okay, I might be wrong, but the point is that, reach after like 2 days on a post, like nothing.
Yeah. And
then occasionally I would see somebody liking one of my posts, I don't know, like 2 months after it was published.
Yeah.
After it was published, but still, like
it goes through cycles.
For some reason, and somehow it came up. But if you put the time and effort into publishing on LinkedIn, you wanna make sure that it lives on. And I think we're finding the right format to move everything to the website and then repurpose that as well into a daily newsletter. So thanks for sticking around and see you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.